Hey all, I wanted to talk about the longevity of PvP today in New World, what I think its future is, if it's worth investing into, and just some general thoughts on PvP as a whole. I won't be going, as a FYI, I won't be going too deep into PvP scaling because A, in the making of this video, Amazon Games has acknowledged that it needs adjusting, so we don't know much about it. And B, when looking at longevity MMOs, you gotta recognize long term, a lot of this PvP gameplay will be at max level. There's going to be a point where you hit high-end content, and open world PvP is primarily made of high-level players, and PvP scaling will be less important. So with that in mind, we aren't going to go too deep into that, and if you want me to give thoughts on PvP scaling, check out my open beta review where I spend time talking about how it was in open beta versus closed beta. When talking longevity of PvP, we gotta talk about what's currently available. So first we'll talk about the actual combat, then go into the current options for PvP, and then the future of those modes and other PvP modes that could be happening, should be happening, or we would like to happen. So first, overall on PvP in New World as it stands. The pros, the combat system is actually great. It's really fun. There's a lot of depth with the two weapon system and the playstyles you can have with that, the builds you can do. They all feel strong and viable, and there's just so much depth with that core system that you can have. Now, of course, there's a meta, but it didn't feel purely locked behind that meta when playing it, so I think a lot of things are viable, and I think that's a strong pro of this game, and why actually so many people enjoy it is just what you can do with it. And the core PvP itself was very skill-based, which is what you want. So hopefully, PvP scaling doesn't mess with that too long, but whatever it is or is not scaled, at the very least, the actual gameplay mechanics of the PvP felt very, very skill-based, which we love to see. And there were some rewards for PvP with the XP and its ratio of kills based off of how long someone was alive, so that's just another small pro for the current system. The cons of the current system, and I'll talk about this more in a little bit, but the actual systems are not as fleshed out as you would like. The rewards, incentives, and stakes all need to be scaled up, and the actual mechanics within the systems could really use some more love, specifically in the open world and the siege wars. And second, there was no fear of dying in the current system. Like, if you died in open world PvP, you just respawn nearby. There's no need to be afraid of losing PvP. You just respawn nearby, your armor would get a little bit of a hit, but scraps were really easy to come across, and so I think that could use some revamping. Now, you don't want to go on the far end where it's too much of a stake to the flag for PvP, and no one ever does, but there is some stuff you could do with that. So on the overall combat system, the system is great. The pros and cons are nothing that can't be adjusted for. So let's talk about the actual systems within the game. So the first one, and in my opinion, the most important one of them all, is open world PvP. So the way it works in New World, for those who aren't too familiar, is that you have the option to be flagged or unflagged for PvP when you leave a settlement or a safe zone. And when you leave it and you go out into the open world, you can then flag PvP or not flag PvP. And doing that, will adjust in what you can do. So if you have PvP flagged, there is some small bonuses, some incentives, but that means when you're out in the world, anyone else who is also flagged, it's go time, it's time to fight. And it's the bread and butter PvP system for New World. But there's some things you can do, because right now all there was the PvP quest for factions, there was fighting at forts, etc. But let's go more into it. So the state of the open world PvP, obviously there's issues with PvP scaling that's being adjusted. That's already been talked about far too many times, and again, if you want my thoughts on it, check out my open beta review. So there's that. We're not gonna get too deep into that. But yeah, so the state of it is this is the core way many people are going to PvP, and it should be the most fleshed out PvP mode in the game. And at the moment, it's the most lackluster, in my opinion. Forts felt like a chore to take care of, and were less of an incentive to fight over, and more just they took our fort. Maybe I'll care about it. Maybe we'll see in your faction group chat, hey, they took our fort. Anyone want to go PvP real fast? And half the time, if you're yeah, sure, you go over to the fort and they're long gone. And you just sit in the circle, take it back. Okay, cool. We got our slight Azoth, decrease, wherever it was, right? So it was very lackluster. And the PvP faction quests kind of got old after you grind them a few times. And like we would go and all right, no, it's PvP night. Let's go. Let's take Everfall. Do the next night. Let's do this. Let's do that. And like after you do it a few times, like we gotta go and spend 4 hours or 2 hours or an hour or whatever. There's like grinding that like. And because the issue is like what I was experiencing is there's kind of a coin flip if you ever got resistance. Like there was one night we went and grinded PvP quests in Monarch's Bluffs and we spent 3 hours, 5 of us doing it. We just spent 3 hours doing it and we just had like deep talks, which don't get me wrong, it was a great time. But we just like talked the whole time. There's no actual PvP there. And that kind of leads into the whole area population where like you gotta do open world PvP in the area, high area populated places, mainly right now, Everfall and Windsward. Maybe as the game progresses, that'll expand more as people get into the actual late game settlements, but for the most part in the beta, people are just there because that's where level wise most people could be at the time. But then if you want to just open world PvP that wasn't like the quests or fort fights, you just go to Windsward and you would like go to the North Gate and there'd just be like fights going on out there, which was a blast. I had fun with, but like the core system of this open world PvP needs more than just, oh, here's this redundant, go to the north of Windsward and just keep fighting people until you get bored. Like there needs to be more to it. The PvP quest system for the factions gets stale, it needs improvement. So I think this system is the core system, and I think AGS just needs to flesh it out. You need to build more mechanics with it and make it more worthwhile. Like rewards need to be greater, stakes need to be higher, and like re-upping into PvP flag again needs to be more worth it. Like when you think of like actual like hardcore PvP games that was just like actually like a competitive fighting game, or Valorant or League of Legends or Call of Duty or a Smash, like where you have ranks or incentives to grind like actual fighting other players and rewards for it, like that idea and that like feeling for wanting to keep doing it is not really there long term, in my opinion, at the moment with how the system is. And you need to up that with the open world because it's the main way people are going to do PvP in this game. The wars are a bit more infrequent. The Outpost Rush, maybe once everyone gets high level enough to do it, it'll be more frequent, but again, still the most infrequent. So long story short and ramble, kind of coming to a close on open world, it's good. I love the combat. I think the combat of the game is what makes the open world good, but you want also the actual open world PvP to be good with that combat. So it's not just so crutched on the combat being good. It's one of the reasons why PvP scaling is such a hot topic, is because the combat is the only reason why people like the open combat or the open PvP. So if you actually add more value to the open world PvP system, the actual combat can really blossom there. And that's my thoughts on it. You need to really add more to that. I would love to see the fact that it has great foundations, it just needs more. Next, we have the Fort Wars. These are the great sieges that take place in the order that take a settlement, and that's something that happens a decent amount. It's an instance combat, and it's absolutely a blast. I love it. I mean, in the current state of it, like the performance items that need improved, like there's no lag and all that stuff, but that's something that'll happen over time, and it's not really an important moment to really like spec on, because I think those improvements will continue to happen all throughout the age of New World. But balancing of the system could use work right now. Right now, like the core strategies are to just like focus the weapons on the wall while just Zerg rushing site to site to site and just overwhelming numbers on point, right? I would love to see this like actually have a level of strategy and gameplay beyond just Zerg rushes, which is both the responsibility of Amazon Games to make that worth it and needed and add more mechanics and development within the mode to have that as an option, but it's also the responsibility of players to try and do that and not just Zerg rush on attack. So I think that's a core thing, that like this is a really cool way to have like actual strategized wars, and it just felt like a lot of them were just kind of Zerg rushing, not that exciting, right? So yeah, that could help a lot. And the rewards for wars could be better, but it's a balancing act because they're more limited. So like you would love to see a world where maybe it's like a best of 3 or something that you can swap out more people in, so more people get involved. But maybe that's too hardcore for people. But I'd love to see maybe a bit more value to that. But that also goes into the value of owning settlements. In my opinion, needs revamped, and that's a whole nother video that we can do sometime. But like the actual value of settlements could be higher, so the actual purpose of defending them would give like a breath of air before someone else can even take them, or like that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of stuff you could do with that could really just, again, and this is going to be a common theme of the current PvP systems, is just they need to be more fleshed out. So overall, in my experience, I think the sieges are in my experience, the most fleshed out of the PvP in the game, but it doesn't mean there couldn't be more fine tuning with it. And lastly, Outpost Rush. This is the PvPvE game mode of 20v20 where you fight PvP, you roam freely to collect resources, craft defenses, summon monsters, and fight bosses. It's very mobile-like where you're going and trying to get objectives while fighting each other over them and that kind of thing. This is going to be the shortest of the game modes I'm going to be talking about because the game mode has yet to be tested a lot, as not enough people really hit max level in the closed beta to play it. And those who didn't necessarily have enough of them on that server to even like queue up at the same time. So it's definitely the least amount of played game mode at the moment. And I got high level. I got up to like high 40s in the closed beta, which is not like the highest by any means, but it's definitely above average. And I never even played this game mode, so I don't have any personal experience. I've talked to some people who I know who actually were able to play the game mode, so I got their thoughts on it. But yeah, so I haven't played it, so it's hard to say. So for the state of it, based off kind of what I've seen, what I've talked about, it's a fun game mode. It has a lot of potential. Like that was the common thing that I heard, was just, oh yeah, it has a lot of potential. But it definitely felt disconnected to the rest of the world. Like other PvP modes have an impact on the faction war and the game overall, with like the forts and the open world, while this game was more like this isolated instance thing that really felt heavily instanced and just in terms of that. So I think if it got like a ranked mode, that'd be cool, but at the very least, it's not the most touched, so that's going to be in long terms for PvP. It's going to be a great content machine and a great PvP mode because just not many people in the community have gotten into it yet. So I think in terms of that, for the immediate longevity, like over the next few months, that'll be a great way to kind of act as a buffer for Amazon games for people to kind of go into that and play that while they develop other stuff. But long term, it'll be interesting to see how much of that game is actually enjoyed and the impacts of that game not being high. I hope that they improve that. So those are the current PvP modes in New World: the open PvP, the sieges, and Outpost Rush. Before we get into the future game modes, let's talk about real fast instance versus open combat. It's very clear to me that AGS is styling this game where open world combat is focused more around the PvP quest and settlement overthrowing. It doesn't seem to be really planning on any large scale PvP activities outside that, so most likely the rest of PvP game modes that either come out or what they put effort into is going to be instanced. So that means that you are portaled into a sub server or some type of way of being in your own pocket where you're not interactable with anyone outside of who is in that mode, which it makes for MMOs. It makes it feel a bit more isolated and not as joined and not as like open world, and makes the server feel like there's less people if half of it is just in their own instant mode and not actually out in the world. But this will be okay as long as they flesh out the open world system more. Like honestly, like we don't need more open world PvP systems. We just need the one that we have that be like 10 notches higher and better than it is now. So I hope that they focus it that way, where if they want to add more PvP modes and it be instance, that's cool, as long as the open world doesn't just lag behind and lose the fire for like why you want to queue up in it. Lastly, let's talk about PvP's future with the current game modes and upcoming game modes. So I think the 3 current PvP modes have a lot of longevity as long as they can give them all more depth. I worry of the player base getting to the point of not caring who owns what settlement, if it feels too redundant, and that the stakes don't matter at all. So they give us more content with the current systems, like more points of like contention outside of forts for open world PvP, more mechanics within sieges outside Zerg rushes, and turret spamming on walls. So now first thing they gotta do before growing the game modes in terms of quantity, they need to grow them in terms of quality. A great example of a developer who did this, in my opinion, super well was Iron Gate with Valheim. Like for those who aren't familiar, this game came out and is a huge overnight success, and they threw out this giant roadmap of upcoming like content they're going to push out and big things and updates and new areas that they're going to do all in the year because it was so successful. And then after a few months, instead they kind of reverted that and they ended up doing the Hearth and Home content, which was this like overhauling system and adding more depth to it. And with that, they instead focused on, for most of the year, just improving their current systems, making what they had even better, and like breathing life into the game that way. Now, in my opinion, the game is set up so much better for future content, and the core game itself is such a higher quality than what it was, that I'm even more excited for future content, and when that content comes out, I can enjoy it better because the base has been raised so much higher. And I think that's the approach, in my opinion, for PvP that Amazon Games needs to have. Now, so that instead, I've talked about, it's getting a little redundant, so I'm not going to talk too much, but again, those core modes need to get improved. In terms of added content, there was a data mined arena mode and tournament mode for the game that will come out eventually. We don't know much about this, but it seems that there will be like a competitive dueling and fighting system, most likely in the next stone, the Brimstone Sands, which was also data mined. And this is the actual area in the lore where the ancient Romans went to, so there will most likely be like a Colosseum there. So my hope for this is that it offers some type of 1v1 or 2v2, etc. system that's ranked. It will most likely be an instance on a normal basis where you're going to be ported into a mock version of the Colosseum to fight or something. So you won't be able to like watch matches as they go on from if you're not in the instance, because I'm guessing there's going to be dozens of matches going on at once as people try to be the best duelist in the game. So my hope is maybe at the very least, if they go that route with that instance arena, then maybe for like the tournaments that they host, the events are not instance, and instead you could like sit around the Coliseum, like cheering on those who are fighting. And I would love for this like to have like implications with like factions, like rewards for the factions, whoever has like the best gladiators, as I don't want like another Outpost Rush where the rewards and impact are just so non-existent in the actual war, where it's just on its own little island, and that just is not as exciting to me personally. So I think there could be a really unique like way that Amazon could pivot this to have these arena fights that people could watch, cheer on, maybe even bet. Who knows? You don't want to get into the argument of betting, but who knows? But there's so much that they could do with that, so it's really, really exciting. So like either way, like super promising mode that a lot could happen with it. So we got open world PvP, we got the wars, we got the MOBAs, and eventually we have the duels. Like what more PvP could you want? Again, would love more PvP points of interest in the world. I think a dead zone would be like super sick, like an area that has unique resources or something there that you can only enter while flagged, and they very much like Escape from Tarkov or like Hunt Showdown, the like old school RuneScape way, where if you go in there you are PvP enabled, you can get things that are unique to that zone. I think maybe even going to a step further, like a settlement that requires you to be PvP while in it would be awesome, but I think something like that is too far down the rabbit hole. But a dead zone could be really interesting in my opinion, like some type of PvP only zone. So I think that'd be really cool. I think you could do a lot of fun stuff with that, but that's more of a pipe dream in my opinion. I think what we have now on the realistic is you take these 4 core systems of the open world, the wars, the Outpost Rush, and the arenas, and you got amazing pillars for PvP. The longevity off this is huge. There's so much you can do with just these 4 things. So as long as you can build off of them for longevity, like that's all Amazon Games like needs to do. So yeah, I think that's a great way to go about it. On the final note, PvP servers are a bad idea and should never happen with New World. I'm not going to go too deep in that. If you're curious about that, you can ask me, but I think that's a terrible idea. Needs to be avoided. But yeah, what are your thoughts? I think any PvP modes that you think should be added, ideas to flesh out the current modes. Right now, like PvP in my opinion has great potential, and in its current state it'll be very enjoyable for a few months, but long-term past these initial months, the modes just need more fleshed out, maybe some more added modes, but just more substance needs to be there. As the core combat is great, there just needs to be some more things that you can do with it that's more rewarding. So my only hope is that Amazon Game Studios does that. Either way, thanks for watching, and let me know your thoughts on the current PvP system. Bye.